Community Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ahmed Khalid and Ahmed Al-Hamamsi from Middle East. Our global S&OP Community Podcast mission is to build a global community from supply chain, marketing, trade marketing, sales and finance all over the world, where everyone's voice could be heard and listened. Every week, we host a new episode with great thought leader in the S&OP industry. We believe that one word, one story, or one conversation could open up the light in the screen of your consciousness and you'll never be the same again. We discuss hot and trending topics with our subject matter experts by asking the right questions that uncover their valuable experience in our show. You can visit our website ahmedkhaled.co. Stay tuned every week with our global S&OP Community Podcast. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those beautiful people who are listening and watching us right now around the globe. Welcome again with another episode with our global S&OP Community Podcast. Let me stress always on our mission in our global S&OP Community Podcast. Our mission is mainly building global community from supply chain, marketing, trade marketing, sales, and finance, where everyone's voice could be listened and heard. Your voice matters for us, and we need you in our community. We need your experience, we need your knowledge, and we need your stories. We need you. We host global thought leaders in the S&OP field to uncover their valuable experience and knowledge to our global S&OP community. They share mainly their valuable knowledge in our podcast. And what we can guarantee you that this knowledge that you will receive or absorb is a knowledge that you will never find in books. A knowledge based on practicality, based on years and years of experience in the marketplace from our guests. Can you imagine those kind of experience could be in your pocket by only listening to our podcast? Only listening to our podcast. Those great values and knowledge can literally change your life and positively impact your career and your business. That's why I'm asking you right now, if you can open your iTunes, search by Global S&OP Community, you will find our podcast, subscribe to our podcast so you can be notified every Sunday with a new episode, with a new trending topic in the S&OP. And today we have one of the trending topics. Our topic today is the difference between sales and operations planning and the integrated business planning. What are the core focus for S&OP and IBP? What are the horizons for each of them that they can focus on? What could be the roles and responsibility and accountability on each one of them? What are the main features that differentiate S&OP and IBP? Many questions are in the mind, and we need your engagement today. And feel free to ask whatever question in your mind live so we can jump into your questions and take your questions on spot. Our guest today is a very special guest. Our guest today is Gabriel. Our guest today is Gabriel Werner. Gabriel has over 20 years of experience in supply chain management and consultation. He is specialized in S&OP software implementations that serve the company purpose. He implements solutions advisory and consultation for S&OP and IBP. His journey in advising and consultancy is really inspirational. He is a great speaker in business and SCM. He played many roles in advising and consultation, from senior solutions advisor to director solutions advisory, vice president EMEA solutions advisory, and currently he is the VP for Blue Yonder in Germany, Austria, and Netherlands. His passion is mainly machine learning and operations research. I think that we have a lot of values to be driven today with Gabriel. I love his philosophy. He has a great philosophy in life. His philosophy in life is do it by the book, but be always. So may I ask you please to welcome with me Gabriel, but before we introduce him, let's give him some applause. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello, Ahmed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. That's been awesome.
It's a pleasure having you today. Thanks, firstly, for accepting the humble invitation, and great to have you in the show. And I'm sure that we have an interesting topic today, which is the difference between S&OP and IBP. And I know that you have a great philosophy that we will discuss it today. So the first question, mainly, it's our discussion. What is the difference between S&OP and IBP?
Okay, right into it. No, that's great. So the difference is, and I think we need to take this question sort of from different angles, if you will. So in a simple way of phrasing it, I would argue IBP should actually just be a high maturity state of S&OP. But if we look at it from a practicality perspective and how it's being deployed, then we will find more difference. And we will probably have to describe S&OP slightly less ambitious, slightly less lofty, if you will, and then actually look at IBP as bigger, as broader. So, for example, let's just simply begin with the objective of the whole process, right? Then S&OP, the way it's often implemented, and I'm very consciously phrasing it that way, the way it's often implemented is going to focus on volume-oriented planning and demand and supply balancing, which, and this is why I said it the way I said it, is not the textbook definition of S&OP, but it's probably the most common reality out there. That's what companies tend to achieve, and it's also from a request perspective, companies that come to us and seek technology support for their process, they often have a big headline of S&OP, and then when you look at the detailed requirements, okay, it's demand planning, it's supply planning, and it's balancing the two things. But again, for the consultants out there who have learned S&OP on textbook, they will disagree. They will say no, it has to be much more and it has to be much broader, and they're right? They're absolutely right. But as I said, I'm speaking more from the let's say the sad reality out there. Now, if we were then to switch over to IBP again from a process objective perspective, then the focus changes, right? The focus is on the delivery of the business outcome, right? On making the numbers, very simply put, right? Every company puts out some numbers, right? It's typically that time of the year, right? Where companies try and start to come up with a plan for next year. And if they don't have an S&OP or IBP foundation, it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be typically something like this, some top-down activity where company leaders will say, hey, you know what? Let's grow by X% next year, and then they kind of spread that out into the different parts of the business. While there's maybe also some bottom-up activity where people in the field actually have some thinking process going on as to what it is that they think they can sell and they can achieve in the coming years, and then these two things will come together, and they will usually, they will usually not meet, right? So it's tough. So if you have an IBP process, this is what the Ollie White guys like to say is then the budgeting process becomes a significant non-event, right? So budgeting is still as significant as before, but it becomes It becomes a non-event. So if you don't have that, then it's becoming very, very hard to come up with the objectives. But once you have them, the IBP process is far more value-oriented, and it's far more based on the idea of let's make sure we deliver our business financial objectives, which also means a change in focus for the two processes. The S&OP process will typically be fairly internally focused, and again, speaking from real implementation experience rather than textbook definition. On the IBP, it's typically more extended, right? It goes beyond the four walls of the own organization. It's more collaborative downstream. It also depends, of course, of the industry, but it could be more downstream, more collaboration with customers. There's something now called JBP, Joint Business Planning, which is typically in the consumer industries, where the retail and wholesale organizations
Customers.
exactly will collaboratively do business planning with their CPG suppliers. So that's coming. But in other industries, it could go more upstream, right? I think of automotive, the OEMs collaborating with the tier ones and the tier twos and so on, building networks. And if you build those networks effectively, you also need to think about business planning on the higher level, on the aggregated level, for those networks. So that, you could argue, is also a trait of IBP when it comes to the focus. It extends beyond the four walls. I think another aspect is the idea of who owns the process, and that is also, again, the history has shown it was typically the supply chain nerds, like myself, who would try and drive this, and then you would find a situation where there's these people from supply chain who come up and suddenly start telling everybody else in the organization how they should work together and how they should align and get together on this process, and it's a challenge in itself, right? So you find it often driven by supply chain, but again, the textbook definition, even for S&OP, let alone IBP, would be it's a process that spans across various parts of the organizations to indeed bring them all, together, which not often works, right? Which also some why is a reason why many people would say, IBP is just mature S&OP, because if it works, then or one precondition to make it work would really be have a process that is sponsored by the execs. It needs to be a management-led process, because at the end of the day, it's about decision-making for how to make your numbers, right? And every exec in every company should be quite interested in that, right? How to make your numbers. That is it's kind of an important question, right? So if it's sponsored by the exec management, driven by the commercial organization, has the financial organization properly included, then you're probably closer to IBP, and you're moving away from real life S&OP. So when it comes to the capabilities that an organization would have to have, which is a certain process discipline, a repeatability of the process, and then also the ability to do scenarios and do some modeling of the business, which is always going to be a tad supply chain centric, given that S&OP is typically a process for companies that manufacture something, that will procure material, build something, and distribute stuff. But for, again, getting over from S&OP to IBP, you then also want to be able to have proper financial modeling, right? You're not going to go replicate the entire financial planning. That would be sort of overkill. But you'd need a certain level of financial planning to be able to have an appropriate view on what are risks and what are opportunities, and then be able to manage those and actually have a life cycle associated with those risks and opportunities, and keep revisiting those as you go through the process. And another key area, which I would argue is definitely a trait of IBP, is much better control of the product introduction scenarios, right? Have the product organization be part of your conversations that it's very clear, when are new products coming in, or when are existing products being updated. What's the timing of that? What's the current demand situation? What's the current supply situation? Bring all these points together and see if there is opportunity arising out of that new product introduction. And then maybe another, and this is a bit more technical, I think another key difference could also be the notion of being connected with the outside world, right? When it comes to data ingestion, being able to use more than your own data, more than the data that you have acquired within your organization, but actually complement that information with external data sources. And while I'm speaking of connection, so this is another angle to look at this question. If again, going back to textbook, S&OP would be strictly speaking, and IBP the same, strictly speaking, a management level process on aggregated level. Now, some technology companies have taken a much broader view on IBP and started to name software products like that, which suddenly have modules which go beyond the scope of what textbook IBP actually is, and include the more operative supply planning, the more operative demand planning. And then there's often this debate, right? Should let's take a demand planning as an example. Is demand planning part of IBP? Yes, no, maybe. I think not, right? I think it's not. What should be part of IBP is to understand what your demand plans are, how they change, and most importantly, why they change. So that you can then do something about it, right? That's what it's about in IBP. But you actually expect the demand plan to come, right? Same with the supply plan, and since we spoke about that earlier, same also with the financial plans, right? They need to come as an input. So therefore, a good IBP process, very well connected. IBP process, sorry, is very well connected to the other planning processes in the organization. So that you really do end up eventually with that one number type plan that you're aiming for. Sorry, that I realized I spoke about.
I like that. It's lovely philosophy. What if you allow me just summarize and understand that? I think it's as you said, IBP, it's a higher level of maturity of S&OP, regardless. So if I'm talking about volume versus value, to reach to this position, I think that you need to have a better capabilities from especially from supply chain understanding. If you just can recall that I'm saying that supply chain, with my due respect, they are very good and they are not biased to anything. And when it comes to understanding, having a business acumen, understanding the full financials of the business or the business imperatives, I don't see it. I'm not telling you from an experience that we have. They are very unbiased and they are all speaking with numbers and to the point. But when it comes to taking a decision with a business imperative or a business direction, it's lack of business understanding or business acumen. That's why I think that moving from volume, because you will see most the demand planning and most supply chains, they are always speaking unit of sale or unit of measurement, something like that. But when it comes to translating that or cash up all of that based on the price structure of the company, it's very rare when you see someone understanding this. They just see that trends, historical sales. So I think it needs a massive experience or understanding the business acumen. That's why you said it's a maturity higher. The process itself. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you raised a super important point, right? Which is the notion of business language, right? So if you talk to operations people and supply chain people, they will go down to the article code, and they will know exactly what the command is, and they will be precise, right? Because they have the data and it's their daily life. When you then talk to a salesperson, that salesperson is probably not interested in the same level of granularity. Finance is going to speak a completely different language, and similarly the product guys. And then obviously at some point you want to, have, we talked about management needs to run this process, needs to chair it, needs to own it, needs to be behind it. You also will have to aggregate into a, language that they understand. And in this context, aggregation, disaggregation is a critical capability, and that's something that needs to be possible on the fly, right? So if you want to sit in a meeting, you don't want to just go over the prepared content. I'm sure a ton of S&OP meetings today are still conducted with PowerPoint. And I'm not even saying Excel, I'm saying PowerPoint, right? So people will make graphs and they will make some notes on it, and then they'll put it up on the screen and say, look how this is moving, and these numbers are going in that direction, and so on and so forth, which means you will not exploit the opportunity that technology gives you these days, that you, in those sessions, you could on the fly do the scenarios, do the simulations, be it the supply chain ones, but be it also the financial ones, the P&L projection, and do it actively. Because many people will answer to you, they will say, I can't expect the exec to look at software, right? The exec will want to see some slides. No, they don't. I mean, why, right? They're smart people. That's why they're the execs, right? So don't underestimate them. So in terms, I mean, there is a bunch of those challenges, right? So the classic one is number plans to actually, we don't care about the numbers. This is something to wrap your mind around in S&OP or in proper IBP. You're looking pretty far ahead, right? Let's say month 6 to 24 or even further. There's all sorts of industry implications here, depending on what the appropriate horizons are. So you are going to look at that, and actually what you do want to understand is you understand where are my opportunities and where are my risks, and you want to make sure that you can manage those through the life cycle of the process. And it doesn't really matter if you're planning 18 months ahead how exactly right your number is, right? So there's this bon mot of better be what's it again? Sorry, don't be precisely right, it be exactly wrong, or something like that. I forgot now. Doesn't matter. So it's more important to make sure that you're directionally right, that you're going the right direction. And if you have to change numbers, then it's actually more interesting to capture the reason why you're changing that number, because that's where the business is happening, right? Whether the number is right to the last digit or not at this stage, at that horizon. It's not gonna make an impact, right? It's not gonna be critical. But what is critical is this notion of language, right? Business language. You need to have a translator almost, right? That's where I think where technology comes in and becomes interesting for S&OP support. You can have that famous one version of the truth, but you can have, I always like to think of it as a cube, right? Where you can have one face of the cube speaks finance language, the other face of the cube, same cube, right, speaks supply chain language, the next face of the cube speaks sales language, but they're all looking at the same cube, but in their language. And then communication can start to come into play.
I understand all what you said, because I think one of the challenges when it comes to a reality that you can see supply chain, they're looking into volumes, and maybe they think that when you grow volumes, you will grow values. It doesn't have any relation between that, because the mix, maybe it's wrong.
Correct.
Maybe I'm growing, but I'm growing from the wrong SKUs or from the mix that will not land the business imperatives. For instance, that I want to have a profit, or I want to have a better margin. I could grow, yes, from the volumes and the SKUs or the products that they have a less margins, but they have a huge density of volumes. This is that serve business imperatives or the business direction, yes or no? This is something that supply chainers, they have to understand. That's why I keep saying that. I love what you said, because you said that IBP, it's maturity stage from S&OP. And also what you said, I think it's very, very impressive when it comes to the scenario planning, because I see this from a real ground experience when it comes to having a simulation of thousands of SKUs. And let's say that I had this is my sales plan, and this is my baseline, this is my tendency, and this is my innovations, all of that. When it comes to that, and when you come into just having a scenario planning and have the cash up, you will find you can hear me, or
there
I'm
was
frozen now?
there was a small glitch towards you. I can find, and then it
no. So I'll keep saying it. To cash up, you will find that there is a gap between the business objective.
Yeah,
I came back.
You came back. We seem to have some
I'm sorry because I'm out.
What I heard was that you were talking about the notion of finding gaps and projecting gaps.
So I'm saying that there is a gap between the business plan and the actual the plan that we put as S&OP. Yes. So I think that's why it's something that we need to focus on. So coming back to that point, do you have any, based on your experience, do you have any tools and technology that can support, based on your experience for sure with Blue Yonder, that can support a decision making and very fast responsive?
Yeah, so there's three points to this. So one is about the gap identification in the first place. And I want to pick up on the comment here from Manal Al-Malik, right? How can you not care about the numbers? Of course, we care about the numbers. What I was trying to say is we don't care necessarily about how precise they are in terms of the last digit, right? That kind of stuff, where people get hung up about debating numbers to the nth degree. That's what I was trying to express earlier on. But Ahmed now raised the key point, right? This is what we're all trying to do in these processes, is to have as early as possible an understanding of am I going to have a gap towards the end of my whatever my period is, quarters, fiscal year, whatever, right? So you want to know it at a point, that you want to know about it at a point in time where you still have options, where you can still do something. And that's where then this is sort of the first technological aspect there, Ahmed, is the ability to project and to have those simulations and to compare then the business plan versus what's currently being projected as future actuals, and identify those and be able to point at the root causes of those, have some root cause analysis. So it's simulation, it's root cause analysis. The next then is okay, what is it that we can do to rectify, right? So this comes back to the notion of risks and opportunities and managing those. So this is where this needs to be properly managed as a recurring object, as an object with a life cycle that can come back. Because if you identify a certain root cause as being the reason for why you're going to have projecting a gap at the moment, you may have multiple options of dealing with that. And not necessarily all the options will have the same remit, merit, the same benefit. So you need to not only within the current cycle be looking at those, but also keep looking at those as you go cycle over cycle and see if they have the impact. Which brings me to the second point from a technological perspective, which is the notion of process orchestration and managing the process. And that's also something where technology can help. With sort of, I'm calling this meta KPIs that actually help you. How good are we executing on our S&OP process in our current cycle? How well have we executed in previous cycles, and extrapolate from there what your future quality is going to be and what you may have to do in order to get that quality, because that gives you decision-making discipline, which is what you need if you want to address those projected gaps. The third aspect, technological aspect, is also keeping track of the resolutions you put in place. So let's assume you have identified a gap, you've done some scenarios, you came up with some ideas. Okay, here's how we could deal with that, promotion, or we need to increase capacity, whatever it is. Those resolutions also need to be objects with a life cycle, right? They also need to be tracked continuously. That's when the discipline then really kicks in, because then you can, as you roll forward through the months and the further processes, you can then also see how effective was that resolution. Do I want to deploy the same resolution if I have a similar problem in the future? Again, keep track of that. You're basically building yourself a basket of options or a basket of resolution levers that you can pull when certain situations arise, when certain gaps are being projected. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I'm saying this because, responsive, it's, I think, especially in the executive S&OP meeting, I'm saying that at the end of the month and the last cycle, the end of stage, sometimes the executives, they need to have a very fast decision. And based on the cash out, that maybe sometimes, yes, we need to have change some budget from here to there, and they need to understand what will be the implication, whether it's on their margin or their profit. That's why I asked you about. I know from an experience on ground that sometimes this scenario planning takes time, and you need to take very fast decision, because this will be implemented in the next cycle of the forecast for the S&OP. That's why I was so curious that it makes sense, totally makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah. So let me respond to that real quick, right? So I have a nice example. I have a nice example from one of our customers, which is Renault, the car brand in France, Renault. So these guys, when they're running our S&OP infrastructure, and they have I would argue they got a very high maturity process going there. But in regular times, they actually took quite some time, and they had the time to do it, right? They gave themselves actually not just a 4-week cycle, they actually had a 6-week cycle to go through the various steps, and they had a good discipline, and it was all going well, right? Really well. So, and then COVID came along, right? We've all been through that. So in March 2020, these guys were in a pickle, right? As you just said, they needed to make decisions, and they couldn't afford to go through a 6-week cycle, and to pick everybody up, and since they had the infrastructure, they actually were able to go through it twice a week. Right, so they reduced from 6-week cycle to twice a week cycle.
Oh my God!
And then they went up to the CEO and the C-level and said, "Look, here's all the scenarios. Here's what could happen now. We could have like an L-shaped, economy. We could have a V-shape. It could go up pretty steep and quickly. It could be more U-shaped. It could be W-shaped." So they ran through all these scenarios and had complete business plans. Let me really repeat that: complete business plans. Multiple of them that they could give up to the C-level and say, "Look, here's what's going to happen if the different types of economy would occur post the shock in March 2020, when the fog was dense and no one knew what was going to come, right?" And the amazing response was the C-level guys. They were like, "How the hell did you do that?" Right? They didn't quite believe that was possible, but this is what is possible if you have the right infrastructure. But here's an interesting question now: do they have to? Should they stay at a twice a week cycle? And they concluded no need, right? There's no need. So agility comes at a price. That's something that everyone needs to internalize. Agility is not for free. It comes at a price.
I understand this, if you allow me, just because S&OP, it's a monthly cycle. Let's agree on that. This doesn't mean that if I have a change or some change on the ground itself, I need to stick to the S&OP or the numbers that I have. Otherwise, I won't serve my customers. So replenishment models, inventory optimization, all of that, it happens on spot, on a daily basis, on hourly basis, on a shift basis. So that's why I keep always saying that S&OP, it's monthly cycle. Something that you can look at it on a time. It doesn't, as you said, the agility, it comes on a spot. So because why I'm saying that, because some people that I see them inside the organization, that there are many stocks on ground. I'll give you an example on that. And the forecast, it was X, and they had an order 2X, and they have inventory 3X. They are not keen to serve the customer by this from their inventory, high cover inventory, because they say this is not aligned with the S&OP numbers. guys, you will rectify this in the next cycle. That's why I keep saying agility. It doesn't mean only in S&OP. Agile mindset. Agile, how can you be agile? And then you can rectify, understand what happened in the past, and rectify it. This is something that I think most organizations, they have to understand. This S&OP monthly cycle that for C-suite or just anybody that can understand this. But being agile, being responsive, being resilient, it's something that we have to have this kind of mindset always in our mind. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is what's happening, right? It's very common, right? That you have this blurring of lines between different planning processes. So effectively, agility is always something I tend to associate, and I should be more precise, agility in responsiveness to what's happening in the supply chain, for me, is a short-term topic, right, for the next few weeks or so, maybe months, depending on the type of business. It's not really an S&OP topic. Still, inside the S&OP itself, you want to be agile when it comes to creating scenarios and be able to think through. So you want, as you called it, you want that agile mindset in S&OP or IBP, just as well. So it's one of those, small fine distinctions that we need to make.
Yeah. So we're jumping to the next question, which is, I think we opened the discussion about the pandemic. So what are the common challenges in S&OP, especially, and what happened after pandemic from your experience? What went right and what went wrong from your experience with the customers?
Yeah. No, so I think the Renault example is one of them where I would say that's obviously something where I feel it went well, it went right. But generally speaking, I mean, even prior to COVID, the typical challenges that S&OP is supposed to solve and IBP are supposed to solve is, make sure that commercial planning operations is well aligned, that financials are properly included, not disconnected, that you have a problem-solving discipline, that you have a way to arrive at a consensus across the company in a repeatable fashion, and that you're able to identify issues, right, and are able to identify the root causes of the issues, the gaps that you could project. So that's sort of the core challenges. Then COVID came along and made all that worse, right? So the commercial planning and the supply. The operations, that misalignment was super challenging in the COVID period, because obviously you had uncertainty both on the supply and on the demand side. So they went haywire at the same time in a quite unpredictable way. So companies that don't have that discipline, it must have been really, really hard during that period, right? If you have the discipline, it was already difficult. But if you don't have the discipline, I mean, well, you're effectively flying blind, right? So if you don't have discipline to arrive at a consensus, how can you expect to arrive at a consensus in a crisis situation, right? That's just not how it works then. So while problem-solving discipline is a good thing to have for any business at any point in time, it actually became really, really critical during the pandemic, right? Because you need to make those calls, right?
Yeah, it's not easy. I know it's not easy at all. But when it comes, I believe that when it comes, pandemic happened. I think that the most companies, they were between two fires. How they can optimize between their real demand, because spike happened in demand. It depends for sure on the industry itself and segment of the industry. Some has lost and some has a spike in the demand. But the first fire, I say that they can serve their customers at any cost, and at the same time, how they can optimize this from the inventory levels. Because I know this feeling, you don't understand. Like, it happens because of the consumer need, or is it because of the retail need, or what's happening in the demand? So from your experience, if you have that, if a company comes to you and they seek your experience or your help on that point, how you will be able to help them in the S&OP and IBP just to take them to the right place?
Yeah, so I think this is this is an interesting question. I think my answer is going to be, I don't think, given the nature of what happened in March 2020, roughly plus minus, right, is there was a sense of urgency. So I'm going to say, if you haven't established your process discipline before that, you're not going to establish it during the time of crisis, because you're going to be in crisis mode. So your focus is going to be far more operative, far more shorter term, granular, which, as we discussed at the beginning of our discussion here, is not where IBP is, right? IBP is aggregated. It's you're planning for months X and out. So I think companies will have seen that, damn, if we had that kind of discipline, we may have been able to navigate this difficult times better. So out of that, and this is what we're seeing now, right? So now that it's 18 months later, we're drowning in requests for help and requests for proposals for systems to support S&OP and IBP processes, because companies have just gone through that experience, and they've realized if the next big thing is on the horizon and we haven't built that discipline, we'll be in a tough spot again. And I guess, I mean, we'll all be in a tough spot, but it's going to be tougher for those who haven't used the time in between crises to elevate their ability to do business planning.
Totally, 100%. Just, I think that I had some technical challenge. I lost all the comments before, so I just I apologize, guys. So if you can allow me,
I can still see them.
You can see them, but I cannot.
Them, yeah.
I cannot jump. I want to send some greetings because the discussion was very hot, like the fire behind you. So we lost this. So I'll send, if you allow me, I'll send some greetings for our audience.
Of course.
Yeah, we have Ihtisham. Hi from Pakistan. Thank you so much, Ihtisham, for tuning in. We have our friend Luis. Hi, best regards from Guatemala. Great to see you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our friend Ahmed Eid. This is how to build the best practice. Exactly, my brother. Thank you so much. Our friend Shadi Al-Jaki. Hi, Ahmed. Great to see you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have SP Ghali. Hi, it's San Shah. I am from Nepal. Great to see you. Thank you so much. And greetings for all Nepal people. Thank you. Our friend Ambreen. Yeah. Hi, Ahmed. Great to see you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I think that I lost too many comments since I had this connection issue. That's why, guys, excuse me if I didn't jump or catch your comment. If you want to have any question, please ask free. Gabriel will be able to answer, and we will jump into your question once we put it. So we have Rosie. Alam, hello, great to see you. Thank you so much. Our friend Peter from Nigeria. Thank you. Ahmed Eid is saying in the normal situation, focus should include an error. Imagine the error in the pandemic, Ahmed. Exactly, Ahmed. Thank you so much. Yeah,
that's super,
I think it's
interesting challenge.
Yes, he was stressing with the same. Yeah.
No, it's a super interesting challenge, right? Because the historic information you have accumulated over the last few months and let's say that COVID period, that's not going to be any useful for forecasting, right? Because it's representing a very unusual time, right? So this is where companies also need to start to explore technologies or techniques, I should say, that go beyond the classic single variate. I take my sales history and I extrapolate, or I just aggregate my sales guys' forecast that they key in somewhere and hope for the best, right? So this is where machine learning comes in, and it can offer an interesting perspective because it can use also additional information that could also be historical in nature, but also could be forward-looking in nature. And this is where some opportunity arises to get out of that conundrum, being forced to use pandemic history information or pandemic related historic sales, which is it's not going to repeat.
I'm so curious to ask you this question about machine learning. So machine learning can predict some, I'm not sure, that outliers situations like what happened in pandemic. It could be, or it doesn't. It doesn't make sense.
No, so the pandemic is a black swan, right? So if anyone tells you they can use machine learning to predict the pandemic-like situation, those guys should try and predict the lottery numbers, which is also impossible with machine learning or with any technology. No, but what machine learning can do, it is far more adaptive. So it will understand the impact of the changed situation, the new nature of the situation. It will be very quick in understanding that, and that's where the value lies.
Okay, thank you so much. So it makes sense. Yes, it makes sense, because what I'm thinking of, that most companies, when the pandemic attacks, so most companies, they were looking into solutions, focus solutions, all of that, but they ignored the fundamentals, which is speaking to their customers or consumers. They understand what happens in that. So it's not all the time technology will solve the problems on hand. Sometimes we need to think by our mind and think in the logical thinking by the right way, speak to the right people, and collect the right data, so we can build on it. And like what you said, it's all about agility from supply chain, because this will not be solved only by IBP or S&OP. It's agility by supply chain. So
yeah, the time, if you invest time understanding your customers' requirements in particularly in the mid and long term, I'm going to argue that's time very well invested.
I can see. So we have our friend Abdelaziz. Hi, I'm proud of you guys. Thank you so much. Ahmed Aid. He is historical initiation. Okay. We have also Ahmed Aid. I said the same. Can you see? He said the same. Gabriel, thank you. Thank you so much. Iman, she is saying I'm not able to attend the webinar. I think now you can if you don't attend it from the beginning, you will find that it's recorded after Iman. So yeah, feel free just to us after this webinar, and Sharmila, I agree. Let them predict the lottery numbers. Now it makes sense. Yes. Thank you, Sharmila. Thank you so much. So the next question that we would have, Gabriel, what culture aspects drive the S&OP? No.
So we had another glitch here. So you were saying what culture drives, and then
well, yes, what cultural aspects drives S&OP and IBP?
So a few of the things we mentioned already. So I think one of the most critical aspects is leadership, ownership, or ownership by the management, or whatever you want to call it. It needs to be clear to everyone who's asked to participate that this is a process the management cares about, right? That management is relying on for decision making, and up to the CEO. That needs to be something that's understood by everyone who's asked to participate, because else I don't think the required breaking of silos will happen, because that's ultimately what you require. You will, and for all sorts of operative reasons, you will always have some form of organizational silos. And that's okay, that's fine, as long as from a mindset perspective, people are agile again in their mind to go across and think across and have some empathy about, okay, why is that finance guy asking the question he's asking? Or why is that lady from sales asking the question she's asking? That is a super important aspect, right? So empathy for what it is that the other parts of the organization are doing, and therefore have a better understanding on what it is that they contribute to the process. So you need to establish that cross-functional participation, right? So the other thing is then to have this sequence, this cadence, right? Something that is repeatable about the process, so that a certain routine arises and you get to that problem-solving discipline and that repeatable decision-making process. So I think those are really key key aspects from which are non-technology aspects, but they need to be in place. Change management, of course, as you go about rolling out such a process. What often works quite well, I've observed in companies, if they have some form of sales ops, some form of a function that is actually measuring how well the process is adopted and how well it's been followed, and what's the discipline in following the process. I think that is helpful, but there's a lurking mistake here. Sometimes that what I found in some, or observed, I should say, in some companies, is that then these guys were suddenly the ones owning and running the process. And that shouldn't be the case, right? It should be owned by management. Management can have help from sales ops, but it should be owned by management.
Yeah. So you mentioned ownership, and I will ask you your personal philosophy. Okay, so you mentioned that ownership should be that for S&OP should be with everyone, from the top management to the least level, I would say, in the organization. This is the ownership of S&OP. But now, when it comes to leading the agendas inside, I would say, executive S&OP, based on what you just recommend, should be supply chain, marketing, or someone who is reporting to someone else. What is, if you're in that situation, what will be your recommendation for the people or the person that will lead the S&OP agenda?
So what you're saying is, let me make sure I understood the question right. So the situation is there's a process running, and let's say it's owned by supply chain. That's the today's situation.
This is the traditional one, but what I'm saying, based on your experience, who should be, I would say, speaking about the structure, should lead the S&OP agenda, speaking about this X, Y, Z, we should, based on the business imperatives, is it supply chain? Who should someone from supply chain? Is it someone who is totally different from?
No, it should be management. It has to be chaired and owned by management. Else it's not going to be IBP, right? Because it's at the end of the day, it's business planning, right? That's what the name suggests, and it's what happens. I mean, to your point, that there's always the difference between theory and practice, right? Reality and what's in the textbook. So if your reality is that someone in supply chain took an initiative and started to evangelize in an organization that they should have an S&OP process, and they have maybe made the first 1 or 2 steps on the maturity curve, then that's admirable and great, right? So we shouldn't be looking down at that at all, right? What we should be doing is we should applaud and commend someone who took that leap of faith and made it happen. That said, if you want to go to level 3, 4, and 5, you will have to get your management on board, and you will have to get them to a point of understanding that they start to see the benefit of having the process in place for themselves, right? They will have better information to make better business decisions, which is ultimately good for them, and as such, of course, good for the entire company and for the benefit of everyone involved. Did that answer your question?
It answers my questions 7%.
Thank you.
And I think S&OP and IBP by default are a sequential processes, right? So should we still work in a sequential process? Yes or no, and why?
So I think in normal times there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because it provides discipline, it provides stability, it provides repeatability, and it provides the ability to absorb new people into the process, right? Because what always happens is, someone who's built this out and created it all is going to go and move on to something else in their lives, and other people are going to come in and have to learn and follow the cadence and do stuff. Now, that said, we heard about the Renault example. We heard about many reasons why some agility, even in business planning, could be required. So I think on top of the sequential process, we should also have the ability to do something which is more situational, right? So let's assume a situation arises where even a business planning level response is required, let's say within 4 or 5 days, rather than which means you can't afford to wait out the cadence to complete by the end of the month. It means you need to act on business planning level, and you need to act within, let's say, 3-4 days. For this circumstance, you need a mechanism as well. So we're actually proposing something here, which we call virtual situation rooms, which are effectively a way of pulling together the stakeholders so that the corporate's RACI it remains intact, even if you step outside of the cadence to drive a quicker decision on business planning level. So I think companies will have to take that as a next step of evolving IBP capability on top of the classic sequence. It's not going to replace the sequence, but it has to augment or complement the sequential process.
Yeah, it is, because it's stages. I believe that week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and repeatability, as you said. So it's all about, I think, how you can customize all of that in the right way that will serve the business and will serve the company purpose. Because I think one of the challenges that what you said, it's repeatability, but without understanding doesn't make sense. Because I see it also that people that they repeat, and they don't reflect. Does it, what they do, make sense? And the granularity, how much they're granular on their, I would say family, I would say pack size, format, that the kind of discussion that they have, is it serving and they spend, is it serving the deliverables for the business, yes or no?
Yeah.
People think in the operations to an extent that they don't think. They move the operation, they move the operations, and the cycle goes on and on without any reflection, which somehow doesn't make sense.
Yeah, which comes back to this notion of how do you follow through with an S&OP or IBP level decision, right? And make sure that the measure you took, the decision you made, is actually executed, and make sure that next cadence you revisit that and say, yeah, did we do what we said we were going to do, right?
Yeah. That's why I say that they got blinded away just by the process itself without any reflection. And the number is, they're losing the numbers, they're losing the business imperatives or the business plan, financial plans, and moving this cycle. Again, it's all about the time that you spend, the quality time that you spend versus the deliverables. Doesn't mean that if I go dig deep more into my SQs or format level, it will add any values. So sometimes I can, depends on the promotions, it depends on the activities of the backside. Maybe I can have a hybrid model at the same time, and I deliver the deliverables of the S&OP versus the quality inputs that I give it. That's why I keep just saying, sometimes we need to get out, think a little bit, think just logic. Is it what we're doing is serving the business, yes or no? If no, we have to be agile and think in the right way. Gabriel, I would like to thank you again for your insights. Loved your about IBP and S&OP. It makes sense, really, and the maturity stage that you have discussed and all of this insightful information, really, I appreciate. Again, I appreciate your time, and I'm very humbled to have you today in our podcast. And hopefully that we can have another session, something else that we have a trending topic that we can discuss together. Thank you for being today here in our podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And thanks also for our audience. So greetings for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for dialing in, all those awesome places. Thank you.